koshering that we're going to discuss is Hagalah. Again, as I mentioned before, Hagalah is that type of koshering that's used with utensils that are used with a medium of liquid, soup pots, cholent pots, and the like. So the very first thing that happens when we use Hagalah is that we take the pot, and the pot is scrubbed down thoroughly inside and out, and if the pot has any handles on it, and the handles are usually held on by screws, those handles are going to be removed and cleaned thoroughly, and then put back, because the area where they connect to the pot becomes built up grease in there, and that you want to get rid of. So the handles are cleaned and replaced. So what we do is that we fill the pot up, and preferably the pot should not have been used for a 24-hour period before the koshering. It should not be used for anything for 24 hours before the koshering is done. So we take this pot and we fill it up to the very brim with hot water. And we're going to bring this to a rolling boil. Rolling boil means not that you have the little bubbles that you see in water as it's boiling, but they have to be huge bubbles that just continue to roll back and forth. Once that's done, once the water gets that hot, and this is where some people start treading on dangerous ground. Some people take a rock, a stone, or a brick for very big pots, and they toss it into the pot. And there's a very good reason for that. The very good reason is that the water is going to go over the rim of the pot and kosher the rim of the pot. That's a great idea, because that part of the pot does in fact have to be kosher. Other people take pieces of metal, heat them up on the stove next to that, and then throw the metal in, and the hot metal against the cooler water also causes the water to bubble over. But let me caution you, when you're doing this, be very careful. You're dealing with fire, you're dealing with boiling water, and you can get hurt. So what we suggest is that you get a polyurethane apron, which is waterproof, and gloves that withstand high temperatures. Never attempt to do this with bare hands or without proper protective gear. So now our pot is boiling, and we'll come to a rolling boil, and we will take perhaps a piece of metal or a stone. We fill the water all the way up to the top, and we throw that in, and because of the displacement of water, the water is now going to run over the side of the pot. And again, as soon as you do that, be very careful not to be standing there, because the water will run down the side of the stove and hit you in the legs or your feet. Now, that takes care of the pot. We still have the pot cover to worry about. So basically, and again, the water that we're using here is not all that hot. We're doing this for demonstration purposes only. But if you have the pot cover, the best way, obviously it's not going to fit all the way in. So what we do is that we dip it in and we rotate it around the water in this way. And keep rotating it until you're sure that it's gone through the water at least once. Once you've done that, the pot cover can be removed. And what we do with the pot, once the pot is koshered, is that we will turn off the fire, bring this pot, hot as it is, over to the sink, and we will rinse it off in cold water. That is, right after koshering, we rinse everything off in cold water. Now, what do I do? What do I do when I want to kosher silverware? Okay? So you have different types of silverware. You have forks, you have knives, you have spoons. So clearly, one of the most difficult things to kosher are the forks, because with all of these pieces of silverware, you have to look at them to make sure that there's no stuck on food, especially on the fork in between the tines. Sometimes food gets stuck in there. You have to make sure that that food is totally out of there. Now, as happens very often with stainless steel, you'll find rust on the fork or the spoon or the knife. If the rust has no dimension to it, then we need not worry about it. It's just a discoloration. Now what's going to happen is that I take the silverware and I have my boiling pot of water, and I'm going to drop the silverware into the water. And again, that water has to be at a rolling boil in order for this to be done correctly. Once that's done, and the silverware is in there, again, I take this entire pot with the silverware in it, bring it over to the sink, I dump out the water, and I rinse off all of the silverware in cold water. So that takes care of our silverware, and that takes care of our pot. Now, there are some utensils that come with a non-stick surface inside. The non-stick surface even though it's a pot that's used with a medium of liquid, cannot be kosher because of the materials that are used for the non-stick surface. It cannot be kosher because food gets stuck in there, and this is a plastic which cannot be kosher. So any coated utensils, coated on the inside, definitely cannot be kosher. The other thing that should not be kosher, or is impractical to kosher, is the good old frying pan. A frying pan usually is used with a very little bit of oil, and therefore it has a halacha that requires liban chomer. Now, if I did liban chomer on this frying pan, the frying pan would begin to melt. Even the best quality will begin to melt. So therefore, when it comes to frying pans, we do not kosher frying pans. I don't advise anyone to try to do it, but if you want to experiment on your own, you're certainly welcome to do so. So that takes care of our silverware, our pot. We now know that coated pots and frying pans should not be kosher.